Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
What do you think of the billionaires should not exist, meaning that no single individual should exclusively own that much money argument? There is a mathematical problem with our economic structure. Once an individual's wealth passes a certain threshold, they will gain wealth exponentially, unless they make a serious effort to give the money away. This virtually guarantees increasing wealth inequality and political instability. I don't disagree with you, but I also want to point out there are very simple mathematical tax and regulations changes that would end this. The solutions are not technically complicated, they are politically complicated for a whole bunch of unfortunate reasons. The people writing the regulations aspire to, and benefit from, this level of wealth. It's not, entirely, a mathematical problem. It's not that simple. It's a human problem. Humans, by their own nature, always desire more. As made abundantly clear over the last decade, an acute issue with the concentration of wealth that billionaires represent is the destabilizing effects they have on democracies. An individual billionaire, if they really care about a particular issue, can easily overwhelm and saturate any normal person who opposes or has a different idea regarding said issue. Even if all the government did when taxing the wealth of a billionaire was to burn that money, it would still be a positive, as it would be removing that destabilizing effect on society. Obviously, you'd hope a government would do something more productive with that acquired money, but the important point is that it's not about balancing the budget, but achieving a specific result in society through the tax code, which has long been a purpose, goal, tool of the tax code. Closing parenthesis. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, 1776, pointed out this exact issue. Adam Smith, the guy who coined the term, invisible hand, to describe the benefits of a free market, knew that the concentration of wealth was a problem. How does he suggest working around this issue? Regulations and taxes. The more I hear about Adam Smith and Marx on Reddit, the more I feel that the big difference between the two is that Smith thought government, regulation, etc., could effectively hold back the excesses of capitalism, and Marx did not, and so advocated for more drastic action. The core idea behind the free market, the reason that we put our trust in it, is that it implicitly rewards more valuable, productive work over less valuable, less productive work. If I'm better at my job than you, or if my job otherwise produces more economic value than yours, the free market naturally causes me to earn more money than you. At least that's my impression of how people think about it, and why they like and support it. If we try to apply that logic to billionaires, it just breaks. The free market has no sense of scale. If the most talented, productive, savant of a person works for a wage and earns $1 million each year, it's really hard to explain how a billionaire could be so much more valuable to society that they're sitting on more money than that savant would earn in 1,000 years. A billion is 1,000 million. There is just no possible way that someone has actually earned that much money by their contributions to society. The reality is that in order to earn that much money, they must have been cheating hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other people. If not directly, then in a massive pyramid scheme. If you take Bezos as an example, the defense of his wealth is that he built Amazon, but he didn't build Amazon. Hundreds of thousands of his employees built Amazon. He led them, sure, and nobody thinks he deserves no credit. The contributions he made just don't add up to $300 of billions that he's earned. The way he earned that much money is not by contributing to society, but by skimming it off the top of the actual productive labor of every single Amazon employee. He's a leech. The other defense of billionaires goes something like, but they took the risk, so they deserve the reward. In other words, it doesn't matter that they aren't that productive, their contribution to society is that they took a risk. This argument is so facile it hardly is worth responding to. First, it assumes there was any actual risk involved. A normal person can bet the farm on an enterprise and take a real risk. That's not who is becoming a billionaire. Every single billionaire today started with more inherited wealth than the overwhelming majority of people will ever have in their lives. The only risk they're taking is having to work for a living like the rest of us instead of coasting off of their trust fund. It puts the cart before the horse by glossing over how they have such sums of money to risk in the first place. And second, it still runs into the scaling problem. A billionaire did not take on 1,000 times the risk of anyone else. Maybe in strict numerical values, but in practical reality they took on the same risk as anyone else who bet the farm. The most they can bet is everything. Their everything is just more than everybody else's. It's so much more than everybody else's that a normal person's all-in is an accounting error in their books. They can do 1,000 people's worth of all-in bets. There's no reason to reward them so much more for a risk they aren't really taking. There's no legitimate reason for billionaires to exist. Tax them. Tax their estates, tax their capital gains, tax their shares and the loans they take out against them. Tax the rich and give it back to millions of regular people that they've cheated to get there. A billionaire did not take on 1,000 times the risk of anyone else. Maybe in strict numerical values, but in practical reality they took on the same risk as anyone else who bet the farm. The most they can bet is everything. Their everything is just more than everybody else's. It's so much more than everybody else's that a normal person's all-in is an accounting error in their books. They can do 1,000 people's worth of all-in bets. There's no reason to reward them so much more for a risk they aren't really taking. This is so very important. It's like having a poker table with a $10,000 minimum and having 100 normal people show up and one guy with $100 million in his pocket. He could be very nearly the worst poker player and still clean house just because he only has to be right a couple times out of 1,000. Everyone else can't be wrong even once, and instead they have to be right about 15 times in a row. This analogy completely sidesteps the fact that in reality the billionaire has connections to make his wins more likely, if not guaranteed, government contracts, and probably pays no taxes on that $10 million while everyone else is paying income capital gains on every win. Funnily enough, almost that exact scene is in the Walter Isaacson's Musk biography. And it perfectly explains both Musk's success and his own obliviousness to why he has it. Max Levchin was at a friend's bachelor pad hanging out with Musk. Some people were playing a high-stakes game of Texas Hold'. Although Musk was not a card player, he pulled up to the table. There were all these nerds and sharpsters who were good at memorizing cards and calculating odds, Levchin says. Elon just proceeded to go all in on every hand and lose. Then he would buy more chips and double down. Eventually, after losing many hands, he went all in and won. Then he said, "Right, fine, I'm done." It would be a theme in his life: avoid taking chips off the table, keep risking them. Agree. Why should people get to hoard more wealth than they could ever possibly spend when the majority of working class people are struggling to make ends meet? At least with a dragon the story ends with Simone killing it. Other stories can end that way too. Billionaires shouldn't exist at all. No individual person works hard enough to justify that on their own. Billionaire stats is simply surplus value being stolen from tens of thousands of other people. Nothing more. How would you determine the ceiling up until which wealth is justifiable? Good question. I reckon it should be based on the median income, the income level where half the country earns more and half earns less. Basing it on the median income gives rich people an incentive to pursue policies that make the median income high. How about 10 times the median income? That's $420,000, 100 times the median income. That's $4.2 million. 1,000 times the median income. That's $42 million. 23,800 times the median income. That's $1 billion. So far that experiment doesn't seem to be working out well with the disappearance of the middle class, and it isn't going to get better. The top marginal tax rate in the US was 92% for people earning today's equivalent of $2 million or more per year. Was the point to try to collect $1.8 million from a very small amount of people? No. It was to deter companies from paying that much to their executives and, instead, to use those funds to buy material, invest in R&D, improve their facilities, and, yes, pay higher wages to more people on the lower end of the spectrum. Government's role isn't to collect money punitively. It's to encourage companies to spend their money in a way consistent with the common good. Problem is we've let the companies run the government, so now they just work together to funnel money upwards. The top marginal tax rate in the US was 92% for people earning today's equivalent of $2 million or more per year. Was the point to try to collect $1.8 million from a very small amount of people? Do you know how marginal tax rates work? Because your 1.8 million number makes no sense. People's lack of understanding of tax brackets causes so many problems. It's also the source of the whole, if I get a raise I'll make less money myth. Was the point to try to collect $1.8 million from a very small amount of people? No. It was to deter companies from paying that much to their executives and, instead, to use those funds to buy material, invest in R&D, improve their facilities, and, yes, pay higher wages to more people on the lower end of the spectrum. No, not really. That is a nice idealistic view of it, but the reality is the tax rate was put that high to pay for war. The highest income tax bracket was 7%, then World War I happened and they needed to kill Germans, so it jumped to 67 to 77% during the duration of the war. Then we no longer needed to kill Germans, so it dropped to 25%. Then World War II started and we needed to kill Germans again, so it jumped to 65%, then 81%, then 88%, and then 94%. Then we had peace for a while, so it dropped down, and then went back up once we had to pay for Korea and Vietnam wars, and then it went down again until Desert Storm when it came back up. Our top marginal tax rate correlates much more closely with, do we need to pay for a war, than anything else. A marginal tax rate would mean that the 92% is taken on values over the threshold. Consider as well that the phrase, shareholders' value, originated as a reaction against corporate executives directing company money to their own total compensation, fancy offices, lunches, jets, any number of things that wasn't returning money to people that had invested in the business, like pension funds. I agree with it in principle, but I've never seen an idea about how this would work in practice. Every plan is basically just, tax them more, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of how billionaire wealth is measured, and it's pretty easy for corporations and individuals to avoid taxes anyway. So make it harder for corporations and individuals to avoid taxes. Problem solved. Make it illegal to borrow against unrealized assets. But a lot of the time the government deliberately puts those opportunities in the tax code to encourage behaviors. Want people to save for their future? Give them tax relief on pensions. Want businesses to invest in R&D? Let the write it off against profits. Want fewer landlords and more people owning their own homes? Increase taxes on income from rent and decrease capital gains taxes on selling second homes. I mean, that's exactly what we did in the New Deal era. We even found a sweet spot in 1964 where we lowered taxes on the top earners and increased federal revenue. We shouldn't act like wealth redistribution is some impossible mystery box. We already got this right once, and the runaway inequality we face today is a consequence of undoing it.